nobody can tell you, although they're all in plain sight. Will?
Just one quick thing. Chin and I were in a class, the creativity class, and one of the examples was the hood of your car, your grill of your car, and how like we see that all the time. But I have no earthly idea what mine looks like. Like I couldn't draw it, even I see it all the time.
Yeah, John.
Another challenge that with this is like drawing ability. And I thought maybe that's just kind of silly, but also then I thought, well, in the classroom, we think, okay, this student has this understanding of the content, but maybe it's their writing ability is not capable of displaying their understanding.
And that's such a great critique of this study, and I didn't want to concentrate on it, but they did a follow-up study where they showed them different Apple logos. And I forget right now, while we're here in this moment, like what the conclusion was there. But so they did like recognize that limitation and follow it up with like just showing them the images. But yeah, it's a really good point.
They probably didn't include the stomach in that.
No, it was like manipulated like the digital image. Yeah. So they like flip the the stem, leaf, or that sort of thing. Okay. This is where the Sherlock comes in. So thinking about information processing and the way that we organize information, the way that we store it in our memories, this crazy way that memory works. Seth and I were kicking these ideas around last Friday, and he was like, have you ever watched Sherlock? And I was like, no, I've never seen Sherlock. I mean, I know like Benedict Cumberbatch and that sort of thing. And he's like, this totally relates to what we're talking about. We're going to show you all a clip, and then we're going to do a quick instructional variation of it. But this is kind of an example of how you might encourage your students to recognize like, oh, my memory does have a defined process in which it organizes information and then gets that information back. And perhaps we can think about ways that we can train, or rather, I won't say train, teach people to engage this type of strategy in the classroom. I don't think we'll be able to do it to the extent that Sherlock does it, but this will like help us think about the actual classroom implications. So this is his mind palace, Sherlock.
It's perfectly all right. But maybe it's not a drug. No, it has to be a drug. How did it get into our systems? How? There has to be something very deep.
Can you stop this? So he's like, I forget the exact, or maybe you can describe what he's searching for here, but he's kind of like puzzled.
Right, so this is toward the end of the episode, and there are several things that he's trying to piece together. This hound keeps coming up. The episode is called The Hound of Baskervilles. And so he's trying to figure out like where in his memory this like hound, and like there are these different, like he has pieces of the actual, like what he needs to like put this all together, but it's just like it's not really clear. He just has like little pieces and he's trying to make connections.
And that phrase that he just utters, like he's trying to figure out, and then he goes like, it's something very deep. And that just plays so much into our talk about memory, and Gredler talking about just how memory is stored. And so he says, it's very deep, I've got to find it. So he goes to his mind palace.
Get out.
What?
Get out, I need to go to my mind palace.
What? He's not going to be doing much talking for a while, we may as well go. His what? His mind palace. It's a memory technique, a sort of mental map. You plot a map with a location. It doesn't have to be a real place, and then you deposit memories there. But theoretically, you can never forget anything. All you have to do is find your way back to it.
So this imaginary location could be anything, a house or a street?
Yeah.
This is a palace. He said it was a palace.
Yeah, I mean, it would, wouldn't it? my God.
Sound.
Here come the lights.
Wow.
There they are. Okay. So, I don't know if we can build a mind palace very quickly to the extent that he has. But I think it's really interesting that it really represents this theory that we're talking about, that the information, the learning that we have is somewhere, and it's in a certain fashion, and in order to enhance our learning and our memory, we just need to organize it so that it can be processed better. And so, in the few minutes that I have left with you all before I turn it over to Seth, I'd like to just dig a little back into the days when I taught high school social studies, and back to the days when I taught AP European history. This is my favorite class to teach, and you know, as you look at the syllabus, like it's supposed to cover European history from the time of the Renaissance, so like 1300s to present day. I say supposed to because, you know, like with these AP tests, they never get up to the present day. But anyway, there's a heavy emphasis on certain periods, and one of those that you can kind of always count on seeing is the time of the Enlightenment, or like the Age of Reason, the scientific revolution in the 1600s. And so that's something that you definitely want to cover in class. And my thought here is that by engaging era-specific visual text, students may construct mind palaces for each era of European history. So if I were to think about it, like, there was a lot of times when I did use like a famous painting and say, they have this in the book, like this has survived throughout time because it is very representative of the history that's taking place. And the thought, the idea, the classroom scenario that we're going to get into here is, what if we could take some of these very representative paintings, and if students perhaps had like, I don't know, just how many different eras between like 1300s and today. I mean, let's say if they had 10 paintings, like almost like an art gallery in their minds, that they could roll through, and like when they see a question about like the scientific revolution, if they could think, oh, experiment with an air pump. Like this is something that I remember, and it contains a lot of the terms and ideas from the 1600s. So, we're not going to go like full-blown visual analysis of this. I would like you to just take a moment. This is called an experiment with an air pump. It's a painting from the 1600s, or it might be early 1700s, I forget. Somebody will look on their laptop in a second and tell me I was wrong. It's supposed to be representative of the things and ideas that were becoming more prevalent and really shaping that era of European history. You all have been looking at this while I've been talking about it. There's a lot of different aspects. Some of us are really familiar with looking at art and certain like things that artists do. And we can certainly use those insights. Some of us like are taking a fresh look at this for the first time, and that can be really valuable as well. One thing that students often miss, and I just want to point this out to us, it's called experiment with an air pump. And the thing in the middle, that piece of technology, there's a bird resting in it. I say resting, I don't know if it's resting, because the air has been taken out of the bowl that it's sitting in. And so it might be dead, I'm not sure. But, you know, the thing is, like, they're manipulating nature here, and they're playing with life. And as you look at this, I'm just wondering, what do some of the faces suggest if this middle piece represents the scientific revolution and the way that humans interact with the world is changing? all these people represent different perspectives. What might some of those things be?
Fear.
Fear? Where do you see that, London?
The woman, and the guy's even comforting her.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other woman in back is closing the windows, like she's ashamed of what's happening there.
There, yeah.
At night.
So the figure in the top right definitely has like their hand on the shades. And yeah, I don't know if they're concealing what's happening, or maybe they're letting the light in. Like, we would have studied this in class, but a big thing during this time is scientific societies are forming. You know, groups are forming for people to study and further, you know, scientific knowledge. And one of them, particularly in England, was the Lunar Society. This is a nod to them because, well, when would they do their experiments? Well, at night, when the moon is out, is about the only time at this point in history when you could travel really well at night. And so this is kind of a nod to the Lunar Society when they might stay up all night and use that to work together, the light of the moon for transit. So you're kind of seeing what's going on here. That's like a term that they might need to be familiar with, that they can embed in this image and let it serve as a mind palace. Maybe like two more faces.
Yeah, I see, right in the middle, the young girl, she's the youngest character in this piece.
Mm-hmm.
And her mother or her guardian or whatnot she has her hand wrapped around her neck, and the mother's face is turned away. But the little girl is looking up towards that bird, and it can show the generations, of thinking, how this little girl is the promise of the future.
That's huge. I mean, like just in there, like that relationship that's portrayed, the two different approaches to the phenomenon in the middle, like could be very representative of the societal switch that's occurring.
Yes.
Any others?
From the figure in the middle, I guess the scientist in the robe, he's looking directly at the artist, and I see determination and confidence almost.
I mean, this is, like, he looks a lot like the Back to the Future guy, but I mean, like, very much, like, he is invested, he is in it, and he's almost offering to you, like, will you enter into this new way of seeing the world? Will you help progress society? Or whatever his like view of science is, you're being invited into it. And he's very gung-ho. There's certainly others that we could entertain on there, but I hope you all are getting the gist of this. This is a way, this could serve, visual text could serve as a mind palace of sorts. For students, and I think you could use this in a whole lot of different settings beyond social studies, but a place to, I mean, all these things are terms we could have had in a textbook. There are terms that we certainly could have lectured on in class, ideas, and yet if perhaps at the end of the unit we can attach those to something like this, well then we can leverage that and just proof of what you all talked about. In 2000, on the AP exam, there's a question, explain the development of the scientific method in the 17th century and the impact of scientific thinking on traditional sources of authority. Certainly with the familial relationships there, you could like read into this idea of like old authority and like new. So that's something that, again, we discuss more in class and have more to be able to embed into that image. But then from 2004, they asked the question, assess the impact of the scientific revolution on religion and philosophy in that period. And you guys got at a lot of the different changing of the guard in terms of ideas. And so that's a mind palace in the social studies classroom. I'm going to turn it over to Seth to guide us elsewhere.
Okay, thanks, Matt. So, what implications does this have for instruction? So we've been talking, Matt's kind of got at a little bit with the mind palace. It's funny, so I don't know if anyone else is interested in Sherlock Holmes, anything like that. The series Sherlock is awesome on Netflix. Really, really good. Well, what's cool about it is that it's actually, so that like basically what the series does is it takes the original writings by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and kind of spins them a little bit, puts like a modern take on it, and so it's set like in present day, ish kind of times. And so, whereas for Sherlock of today, it's a mind palace. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle called it a brain attic. And so whenever he's writing, if you're reading the original stories and stuff, he'll talk about the brain attic, and that's essentially talking about the same thing. Which made me like start to think like, oh man, like I was trying to think about like when did Sir Arthur Conan Doyle write these, and like is he like this? Was he thinking about information processing theory before it was even on the scene, and like all these sorts of things? And so I wasn't able to find anything like explicitly connecting him with information processing theory. But anyway, if anyone wants to take that up and tell me what they find, then that would be great. Anyway. So, but one thing I wanted to start us with in talking about the instructional implications is this idea of the theater metaphor. And so this comes from Gredler. It's like 197 maybe. It's right in that range. If you want to look at it, you can. But I'm going to essentially talk about the gist of it. So when she's talking about the theater metaphor, she's basically comparing like a theater and the different components of a theater with like our, the inner workings of our mind. So in this metaphor, the stage is like our working memory, where these different characters, actors, and stuff are playing different parts. Spotlight, if you think about a theater, spotlight is where the attention goes. So where spotlight being attention, this is where our attention is focused for. On this actual stage. The competing actors that are on the stage represent our different senses that are kind of competing for attention. Our ideas, our intuitions. So this is those are some of the different things that she talks about. And the director, he doesn't explicitly say this, but I think what she's trying to say is the director is essentially you, and you are the one who is determining, where to put the spotlight. Where, how do I kind of how do I take all these senses and put it in the place where I want it to go? And so in talking about attention, this will kind of get into what I'm about to talk about next, but I wanted to know from you guys just this idea of attention, this idea of the theater metaphor, how do you see that connect into the classroom and like working with students?
Students come into the classroom with a lot of different things going on in their minds and their social life, in their stomach, all sorts of stuff. So we need to think about how are we going to, the focus of the classroom, the focus of the activities, how are we going to let that be in the spotlight and have all these other really important things that the students care about fade into the background.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
I think it plays into, doing, especially working with like younger high school students or junior high students, coming in after lunch, like you said, getting some type of attention focusing pre-activity to not only focus their attention, but almost like the picture you showed, get their mind in the zone for what's about to be talked about and discussed. Right. It's like an image that relates to that, because I know, having taught that they come in, they're just crazy, but you get, with one activity, you can really help focus it. And like, I think in the textbook it had mentioned that like in the spotlight, all these people are running in and waving their arms around. It's like kind of making all those people go off to the side for just a little bit can help.
Yeah, Jim?
And I think setting your objectives and goals, like constantly, you can constantly pull students back to where you want them to go. Oh, what you said is great, but let's come back to what we need to focus on today. We can talk about what you want to talk about next time or something. And another thing is what Will reminded me is the attention span. When you work, because I used to work with elementary kids. Like, I don't know if this is true, but people said your attention span is associated with your age. So maybe 2 years old can only like last 2 minutes or something. Yeah. So I read this theory about 10-2 activities. So every 10 minutes of lecture, you need to give people 2 minutes to process the information, reorganize the information, connect to the information. So give them that 2 minutes, because after 10 minutes, they said nobody's listening, nobody's absorbing, nobody's paying attention anymore. So anyway.
Yeah.
I kind of think of it like in my
when I taught high school chemistry, you go into a chemistry lab and you have all these things going on, and you've got all these things, different things you have to do for that one experiment.
Right.
And that's kind of how I see like the competing actors, all these different things that you have to do in order to do that one spotlight thing, which is the experiment. And then like the work in memory is, I gotta have all this up here so I can like go through the experiment. So you know, I've got all these competing things, and then the director's just that teacher, just making sure the whole play works.
Right.
The experiment works.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because, yeah, obviously I said the director is you, and that as I think kind of how it works within how Gretler's talking about it, but we're connecting this specifically to instruction. You kind of, I mean, the student is their own director in a sense, but you also, as a teacher, act as the director, kind of saying, no, you're wanting to put your spotlight here, that's not where it's going to work, you need to, you know, focus that spotlight right here, because this is, you know, this is how this is what you need to focus on in order to, you know, get through this activity and in order to engage, you know, with what we're trying to learn. So yeah, I think those, yeah, I'm glad you guys brought those things up. Another thing that Gretler talked about, and Willie, you kind of got at this a little bit in like kind of preparing students for what was about to be learned kind of thing. Matt, can you press escape and then go to, I think, the third tab? Nope, right before. Yes. The advanced organizer. So this is a really basic, simple video to kind of refresh your memory on her talking about advanced organizers. We're only going to watch about a minute of it, but I think it sets us up well for talking about this. Go ahead.
Information overload. What comes to mind when you think of those words? Have you ever experienced information overload when studying for an exam, or even just when sitting in class? Sometimes learning everything that's required can be overwhelming and seem nearly impossible. Even if you're provided with all of the information, it can be hard to remember everything. This is a challenge that teachers face regularly. We must provide our students with large amounts of information in a way that helps them understand, retain, and remember it. There are a number of strategies that teachers use to do this, but the one we'll discuss in this lesson is the use of advanced organizers. An advanced organizer is a tool used to introduce the lesson topic and illustrate the relationship between what the students are about to learn and the information they have already learned. They are used during expository instruction, which is the use of an expert to present information in a way that makes it easy for students to make connections from one concept to the next. By using an advanced organizer to link the new information to old information, the new information can be remembered more easily. There are three basic purposes of advanced organizers. First, they direct students' attention to what is important in the upcoming lesson. Second, they highlight relationships among ideas that will be presented. Third, they remind students of relevant information that they already have.
Okay, that's pretty much all that I wanted to take from that. So yeah, the reason I had us watch that is just, like I said, to kind of refresh your memories on stuff that Gretler talks about, because whoever was narrating that basically said everything that kind of Gretler talks about, just kind of did it in a simple and straightforward way. And so here are some examples of advanced organizers. I'll have you take a look at those for a second. So I have actually never used most of these, I think. Whenever I looked at this, I was like, I haven't even heard of some of these. So there's kind of an example for us to see. I have a couple questions. I figure if you can't answer one of them, maybe you can answer the other. But my first question is, what advanced organizers have you found to be effective in your teaching? Or what lessons or concepts have you taught that might have been more effective with advanced organizers? So if you have used something like this in the class to kind of prepare students for what they're about to learn, maybe answer or think about what you might say to question one. The second question is maybe reflecting, I haven't used really advanced organizers before, but I feel like it would be really useful for teaching this, or something like that. What do you guys think?
Can you show us the,
Go back.
yeah,
The double bubble.
yeah, there we
There you
go. Yeah. Are we talking whole group or?
No, I was just gonna kind of like free response for you guys to talk. Anyone with? Sorry, I can go back and forth if I need to.
As we were doing, as I was doing the reading, I kept thinking, and this wasn't ever mentioned, and I think it's unfortunate that it wasn't. It was like one of those things, we're just going to ignore that this happens because it doesn't fit our theory. But that idea of reconstructed memories, and I don't know how many of you have studied or read about those reconstructed memories, but the more times you access a memory, the more corrupted the memory becomes. And you know that that happens, that you tell a story about when you're a kid, and about the 17th time you tell that same story, the story has totally changed. Because then somebody that's with you says, that's not the way the story goes. And you're like, you are wrong. I've told this 17 times. But the problem is I've told it 17 times, and I've accessed that memory so many times that it's become corrupted. And this didn't ever mention that. It almost made it seem like the more times you access, the more correct it's going to be. Except for those couple of examples where it talked about when we don't have things to attach it to. But as you were talking about advanced organizers, I thought that is one way to fight that, to go against that. I think of, in language, there's so many advanced organizers that we use, of charts, of ways to conjugate verbs, of number and gender relationships. And you do these pictures and these charts, and I have students that come and show me their elaborate organizers that they've created. I usually just say, good job, and no, I'm not giving this to all of the students because you have the value of doing that because you did it yourself. But occasionally, I do give them organizers. So I think that one thing that an advanced organizer does is it fights that idea of that reconstructed memory.
Other thoughts? How many would you say actually use some sort of advanced organizer regularly in classes you teach? Mostly up here. Do you work with older students mostly or younger students?
Teachers.
Okay.
Oh, teachers love them.
Yeah, but and that makes me not want to use them.
No, because they do.
Like,
You're absolutely right. That's the way I am too.
I've used foldables in my class. That makes me want to throw them away. Please don't use a foldable because you probably haven't thought about it. But I think I use them because they help me think about how I'm going to present in a way to spotlight particular things. And then we can all kind of have a common understanding. But I try to always give room for people to write their own responses too. But just to come to consensus. One that's not up there that I really have come to like a lot for comparison is a top hat, just a T-chart and then what they have in common on the bottom, because we tend to use Venn diagrams for that, and they are messy, and I don't like to use Venn diagrams, but I really like the top hat for me personally as an organizer, and suggest that when people are struggling.
I use them, mine are adult learners, they're pre-service teachers, probably every week because it's how my brain organizes information. So I don't know if it's for them or for me. But they appreciate it. I present things in 2 ways, sometimes 3, depending on how you organize the same information. I present it on 3 slides in 3 different appearances. And that's something that they have commented on. And as an advanced organizer, like when you anticipate there's 3 things that are going to go there, you think in that way. So when things have steps, or tenets of, or 3 this, or there's 4 ways, you've thought about it already. I personally feel that it works for me, and I'm just forcing my learning style on them, that you connect with it and you remember it because there was 4 blanks and now there's 4 things within it. But you saw it ahead of time, so you connect it with that in itself. But I probably every week, especially when something has a really large definition, and you, whether it be smart art or shapes, I don't think I go a week without it.
Okay. Megan, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, similar to what you said, Carmen, the organizers organize not only the content but the thinking behind it. I think all of those examples have a way of thinking or a function of thinking connected to them, so it's not just